This will be the second major video for the HK CB&I job. And this one will talk about a lot of the mapping graphics that we produced. There were quite a number of them for different purposes, but some interesting stuff. So we'll let this one cover the mapping story. The first one was sort of an introductory section to tell how big this refinery was, and they set the comparison in the downtown Washington, D.C., because the arbitration before COVID was intended to happen in person at the International Arbitration Center just north of the White House here in Washington, D.C., so that seemed like a good place to set a size comparison, since people would be, the arbitrators and the lawyers would be familiar with the city of D.C. So we marked a few of those landmarks here. As it turned out, the arbitration was all done virtually, and don't know any of the arbitrators ever actually went to DC. So we produced this case, or this graphic, with DC as the background, and over that we plotted the footprint of the Cartagena refinery, which would basically cover all of the popular areas that are span the popular areas downtown. Draw the photograph of that in its correct size relationship to the downtown DC, and then for close-up comparison we put in a few hopefully recognizable world landmarks, like if you put Wembley Stadium down over the refinery, it would be that large compared with these three primary units in the refinery. We also did the comparison with the stadium in Madrid. In Rio, which we figured some of the arbitrators would be familiar with. Also a giant stadium, but it also helps set the size for how big some of these units are in this refinery. And then finally a close-up comparison of three of the primary units here in the refinery with a chunk of the mall where the National Art Gallery is. Those three units are as big as that whole section there. So interesting size comparison. The next graphic was an interactive overview of the area where the refinery is. The refinery is down here south of the city of Cartagena in Colombia, and there are two major roads, this blue one and the orange one, that were access routes for the workers. They bused workers from the city down to the site every day, and I think there's graphics that will show that there are thousands of people that came every day. This is a monstrous undertaking and required lots of workers that had to be bused in and out of the site using those two main roads. It turned out that those roads were also a bottleneck. When labor disputes happened, the unions could block the two major routes into the site and keep workers from getting to work. So they played a role in some of the legal disputes in the future. But as far as the overview, we included a few street level shots to show what the neighborhoods look like, the nature of the road, not super highways. They're just 2-lane, 4-lane roads sometimes to get the workers down to the site. So kind of helped visualize the environment of that the refinery was in. A shot of one of the approaches to the refinery. It's off to the right here. Here's a photograph of one of the gates, just an entry gate into the old refinery on the west side. A shot of near one of the gates on the east side. Again, just a 2-lane road out there to provide access to this monstrous area. The refinery also had this close-up of a number of the laydown areas. It was a contributor to the construction delay in that there were not generally laydown areas close to where all the construction was going on, because they were building all these complex units down here, but laydown had to occur in remote areas, which required a lot more logistical management of getting trucking things in and out, things would arrive in the port up here or down at this roll-off yard and have to be trucked to a laydown area and then trucked back in when they were needed at the construction site. So it contributed a lot to the construction delays and the bureaucracy of getting things in and out of the country and then into the construction site. So kind of an overview of that issue, and then close up here of those laydown and access on the refinery site itself, and then links to a few photographs. So kind of an interesting overview. This whole thing was done in PowerPoint too. So this was an interactive piece that didn't require flash, but still gave you a pretty good interactivity. So that was the site overview. And then we did a couple, we took advantage of a series of Google Earth shots to show the evolution of the site over the period of times that it was under construction. So we had the earliest photo that we had here in March of 2005 that shows the old refinery and the empty fields out here that were going to be developed and add new units to this refinery. There's an overlay button here that lets us click on the footprint of the units. Like the tank farm is in green here, it's going to get much bigger. Laydown area is going to be put in out here, and these several units are going to be added to this refinery as part of its upgrades. So as we go through the evolution of these photographs a step at a time, we've got ever more work going on out here. What was forest and jungle has been graded, and units are being added through the construction of this site. And now that when you overlay the footprints, you can start to see structures going into each of those units. So it's quite an interesting development to step through all of those over the period of time that this thing was constructed. Gives good evidence the fact that this was really an $8 billion project for just the massive size of it. Probably the most interesting is the before and after comparison. So here's what they started with: an old refinery and a lot of empty fields with some of the key units that are going to be put out there. And then the final structure is this very dense, large and world-class refinery. So I'll switch back and forth a couple of times here. It's kind of interesting to watch. You can look over here and see things like these tanks that stayed the same, that didn't really go anywhere. And then all of the things that were added, this whole undeveloped area became a massive part of that refinery. So an interesting overview of the evolution. And then finally, we were able to take advantage of some of the thousands of photographs that we had. We had one library of 8,500, and I'm sure there were several other libraries of thousands, so probably approaching 10,000 or more images of this refinery throughout the history of its development. Some of them are close-up ground level shots, and a bunch of them are these helicopter views throughout time. Of course, they were taken at different times by different groups for different purposes, but we mined our way through those photographs to create a visual history. So first I wanted to show the raw photographs. So here's this. We chose the looking west point of view because most of the new construction is going to happen down here, where we started out with just green forest. And as we move through time, you can see what was green forest is now graded and ready to take new structures. Photographs develop through time as you show more and more work going on. So in our looking through all those photographs, we found some consistencies. For instance, all of these look to the west, which was kind of interesting. They were all taken from, roughly a similar altitude, and they show, they cover the same, pretty much the same areas, from one shot to the next. So the first idea was that these would make a nice visual history to compare the, how the site was built, and that, of course, provides a lot of tools for the attorneys to talk about when things were installed, when they should have been installed, that sort of story. But looking at these, it's hard to do a comparison. So let me just switch back and forth between two shots here. For instance, things move around, like the storage huts here kind of move in position, and things change from one shot to the other, so you can't really tell what's added, what's changed, what's new, what's old. We, as part of this development, developed a new technique where we could apply this was done with a Python program that would actually distort or morph the photographs so that they could be lined up with each other. So this sequence is going to be the same sequence I just showed you, but the images have been stretched and modified so that they line up correctly. So let's look at this one, for instance. This is the early shot where we got green jungle. And as we move forward, now the parts tend to stay in place. They're not exact, but they're close. So for instance, if you watch one of these tanks, they stay in place while new things are added. So with this technique, you can keep things from jumping around so radically that you can't make a comparison. So as you move forward through time now, you can see how the laydown yard evolves, how the growth of various units changes through time, and you don't have to hunt around with your eye for a landmark that you recognize. They generally stay pretty close together. So this was a new technique we put in place to do these kind of aerial comparisons, since we had the photographs, but they weren't really lined up. The other thing we did was added some overlays that showed key structures, like these pipe racks played a big role in the case. So we wanted to mark their location so you can track their evolution. And we also added the footprint of the new units and the laydown areas that are going to be added. So as you go back in time, if we go back to one of those early shots, we can see here that what's now green jungle is going to get transformed into refinery units, and this set of island pipe racks wasn't even there. It was a whole new structure which was built in pieces in Texas and floated down to Cartagena and dropped into the site, and it sort of forms the backbone of the refinery. So a interesting visual technique that allowed us to line up photographs taken from different points of view at different times to show the evolution of the site. One of the final things to look at, to point out here, is this is one of the bus yards where the buses brought the workers down, and there are times when there are hundreds of buses here. This must have been a Sunday, nobody's working, but there are times when there are just massive amounts of buses down there that brought all the workers in. So again, we did, here's the before and after comparison. So the before, we're going to put in units down here, and the after. So again, lends evidence to the fact that this really was a bigger project than envisioned, and in the end it was worth $8 billion, and the country of Colombia has a super world-class refinery that's going to earn them money for decades to come. So that's the end of the mapping story.